Hey guys, this is Utkarsh, CEO of SiteRecon, and today we're gonna talk about production rates. So glad you've joined me here, and let's get into it. I want to start by a quick breakdown of how estimation calculations run, right? So you start with measurements of the property. You look at turf, you look at beds, you measure everything, hopefully. Then you take the measurements and you multiply that with production rates. You know, how long it takes to do an area on the property. That's production rates. You take the measurements, multiply that with production rates. That gives you man hours, the total hours you will spend on that property during one visit. So you got that, man hours spent on the property during one visit. You take that, you multiply that with the number of visits in the year for the whole year, and that gives you the total hours spent on the property for the year, right? You take that, you multiply that number, total hours spent on the property in a year, multiply that with the crew composite rate, the average cost that you're incurring per hour, paying the crews, right? You take that and you factor in gross margins, okay? Total hours spent on the property, multiply by crew composite rate, multiply by the gross margins, and you arrive at the total price that you want to bid the property on. Right? Now, in this calculation, if you look at this calculation, there are some numbers that are very easy to arrive at. Gross margin, for example, is a target for the business. You decide what's the margin you want to sell the job at. Simple, you just said it. Second, crew composite rate. You look at your accounting system, you look at your payroll, you know how much you're paying these guys. All right, you get an average for that, you have it sorted. The number of times you would visit a property is determined by the market you are in, by the level of service expectation the client has. Maybe the RFP has already specified it. So you look at a combination of these factors and you arrive at the number of frequencies. Measurements, property measurements is a solved problem now. If you come to SiteRecon, we'll give you a measurement that's like 98% accurate. It's going to be tight, super tight. And we have been shipping hundreds of thousands of measurements every year now, and it's our clients love it across the country. Okay, so that's a solved problem. Now, the most challenging piece here is production rates, and not just for you, for every contractor in this country. Everyone is trying to figure out production rates. In a single company, production rates could change from a branch to another branch. It could change if you're looking at the property or I'm looking at the property. It is sort of subjective. It's very hard to agree to it. You have different experience than I do. If you operated a certain set of machines, I operated on a different type of property. Maybe we had different safety requirements to go through. Maybe the client had a different service quality expectation. All of those inputs are flowing into our subjective experiences, and we are thinking about production rates from that standpoint. So when you and I, we sit across a table and we start talking production rates, and we are required by the management of the company, to come up with a production rate, we might just end up disagreeing. We might have an argument. And if we end up nailing that down, it's not something that we want to revisit again because it was a long, painful process. And it's because of these reasons, production rates have been historically very hard to arrive at for companies across the country. Even companies that do a good job, they have been constantly working on it because every once in a while they would come across a property that does not meet with the standards that they have set. Then they have to go back and adjust things. Maybe the crews have changed, maybe the machines have changed. So it's something that continues to change, continues to improve, in fact, as you train your guys. So how do you solve this problem? Where do you start? It's extremely complex. And if you don't solve this, then it's not possible to scale estimating to put out hundreds of bids with confidence that if we win, we're going to make a lot of money on it. So there is a certain sales philosophy that's fundamental to justify investing time in production rates. And that philosophy is this. You want to get your costs down very tightly. You want to be very, very confident about your costs. And on top of these costs, you want to mount your margins. Okay. You can't just think of a price without first setting up cost and then putting margin on top of it. Otherwise, you have not secured your cost and you have not secured your margins either. Once you got your cost, which is total measurements into production rates, into number of visits for the year, that's your cost, into the crew composite rate, that's your cost. On top of it, you apply a margin, okay? Now, that margin could be 50%, 45%, 40%. If it's a client that you really, really want to acquire, maybe even lower, you know they have a large portfolio. Maybe they have a lot of budget for enhancements. So all of these play into where that margin is. But the cost remains cost. And you want to make a conscious decision on where you want your margin to be, right? So you control your cost first, then you play around with the margins. So that's the sales philosophy that all successful companies in this industry follow. And that ensures that you make a profit, right? And you are able to scale your estimating system. So if you want to learn a leaner, meaner business, getting production rates down becomes fundamental because measurements, every other item in that formula that we talked about is sorted. Production rates is not. And it's my hope today that we will be able to arrive at a consensus on what that process looks like, how that can be set up for your company. And it's actually not that hard. It's quite easy. All right. Now, if you think about that problem could be significant. Up to 20% margin on every job is at risk. And it's a number that's come from our clients. In an industry that runs at 8 to 10% net margin in good years, leaving 20% margin on a job can just swing those profits wildly. So what is the takeaway today? By the end of this video, you would have known today's production rate trends. How can you set your company on a path that gets you to establish great metrics for your crews to follow, great metrics for your sales guys to push through on. We're going to give you a base maintenance contract service kit to get you all the detailed items, give you this spreadsheet to work on. And that's going to become your dashboard, your dials to control as you go down into this rabbit hole of getting your production rates right. We're going to give you a spreadsheet to start with. And we're going to do one estimate for you on the house so that you see what are the benchmarks in the market. Where would a competitor potentially price this bid at? What are your numbers? If you would do this for a new property, that's how you could use it. If you do this on a property that you're already operating on, then you could compare estimated hours with actual hours and see where they meet in the middle. So those are the takeaways from today. Hang in tight. We'll get there very quickly. So where is bad data creeping into your estimating system? Where is it coming from? How is it getting in there? One source of bad data in your estimating system is aged and averaged numbers. If your labor rates are not updated every quarter, if your material prices are not updated every quarter, last 12 months or so have been a lot of movements on both ends, labor rates and material prices. So updating them every quarter is essential. Equipment purchases. Between 2015 and 2025, all the changes that happened in the mowers from the side, from the equipment manufacturers, the production rates improved by 100%. The stated production rates of these machines went up significantly. So if in an hour you were doing 25,000 square feet in 2015, in 2025, you were doing 50,000 square feet on that machine. And so over a course of 10 years, that huge change is happening. So ideally, you want to look at your equipment purchases every year, and you want to look at how that's affecting production rates. If you're grouping together service items, okay, so let's say you look at a property and you say, oh, all the mowing services are going to take 4 guys 3 hours from 7:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. to get this done, right? Oh, but is that detailed enough? Probably not, because in there you did not factor in deck sizes. You did not factor in how much time string trimming would take versus edging versus blowing versus mowing. And if it's actually difficult to do one of these services, you would want to crank up the production rate for that service, and keep others constant. But you can't do that. If you look at a property and you just go like, oh, it's gonna take 3 hours for 4 guys, you have no way to break that out and really perform that analysis service by service. So that's another source where bad data comes from. Another source of bad data is just different guys following different measurement methods. Some would just guesstimate, like we just talked about. Some would look at a property after they've got some measurements, but those measurements are very basic: turf, beds, edges, that's it. And then they would approximate everything off from those basic measurements. And these two different guys, when they follow these different methodologies to come up with a price, downstream when you're trying to figure out why am I making money on this job and why am I losing money on this other job, you won't be able to come back and say it's because of my estimates being wrong or because of my crew not performing, because estimating follow different processes. So you can't do apples to apples comparison when you're looking at estimated hours that have been calculated differently and trying to compare them with actual hours where crews have actually gone out and performed the job. So the validation, really, there is no way to validate and tighten the production rates downstream. The real cost of bad data is time lost. We brought on a client recently, and it's insane. Like, they have their business developers doing the estimates. You have the owner reviewing the estimate because he doesn't trust what the business developer did, and then he doesn't trust what he did. So then the production manager comes in, and the production manager then comes up with another number, and then they don't agree with each other. None of them see eye to eye on some of these bids. And so every time there's a bid that comes across, they're spending like 6 to 8 hours per bid, just like going back and forth on this, maybe even visiting a property. And a couple of such bids come up every month. So you can think about that, all that time being spent. These are like high value people, like $100 per person easily. The owner is in there as well. So it's like $1,000 or so is being spent on every estimate being reviewed, and then you've got multiple such estimates being done in the years, of tens of thousands of dollars, hours lost. This loss of time leads to slowdown of the bidding speed. You turn around your proposals slower. We all know what happens when we do that. We lose out on sales because we are not confident about our margins. It could have only happened that we have sold a job, and then when we've performed it, we noticed that it took like way more than what we expected. So we don't have confidence. We don't agree on production rates. We don't look at a property and say, oh, this is how long it takes to do it. And we don't all agree on it, right? So we lose out on margins. When we lose out on margins, we lose out on confidence. We brought on another client in May, and he said, I'm not sure if I should celebrate or be scared every time we hear we have won a big $100,000 contract. Because if the estimate wasn't right, then they would just end up losing a lot of money on it. So they can't even celebrate. And to be sure, what you do? You just add a factor of safety to your price, and you say, okay, I'm just going to raise my price so that I don't lose money. But then sometimes you will price yourself out of the market. The competition is going to get the job, and you will, just lose the deal. Losing deals, tens of thousands of dollars lost there, margins lost, hours lost. That's the real cost of bad data. Bad data that crept into the system because we did not have a good process in place. All right, Utkarsh, all of that is just scary stuff. But what's the way out? We want to go from guessing to knowing. First step there is, let's get a fresh data set into place. Let's start updating our labor rates every quarter. Let's start updating our material prices every quarter, and equipment purchases once a year. Once we have fresh data, at least some of the inputs are under control. Second, we want to get to a detailed set of services on every property. So the idea is, every little service that you perform on the property, you should have a service item for it. How little are these services, Utkarsh? As little as possible. You want to have for mowing every service item. For every machine that you put in the field out there, you want to have a service item for it. For string trimming, you want to have a service item for string trimming obstacles, another item for string trimming fences, another item for string trimming areas. You want to have different items, all right? You want to get detailed. You want to capture everything. You want to have separate items for pruning small shrubs versus medium shrubs versus large shrubs. And this is going to be separate from shearing hedges, separate, okay? We want to get to very detailed, very, very detailed service items. The service items should be as detailed as what you are seeing right now. All right, we're going to get into it in a minute. So that's the level of detail that you should have. Now, once you have that detail, we want to make sure this is validated. How do you do the validation? By looking at the actual hours spent on performing those jobs. We're going to do the estimates using this detail, and then we're going to look at the actual hours spent doing those jobs, and we're going to compare the two. And we're going to find what the difference is, and the difference tells us where the production rates need to be calibrated. Finally, we all as a team, we want to arrive at tools that we can trust, tools that serve consistently accurate measurements to us every time, tools that can help us sort out production rates, tools that help us understand the true costs of operating on that property, that help us do the resource allocation smartly. All right. So when you go from guessing to knowing, you can actually turn production rates into your competitive advantage, and you can move from pricing to survive to pricing to win. All right. Now, you saw this list of service items. All right. You have this list of service items. The first step in getting these production rates in place is, for each of these service items, we want to have a rate range. We want to have an easy rate, a medium rate, a difficult rate. The medium rate is the average of all the crews in your company. And then you look at the easy properties that you have. So, how fast can they go about doing the job? That you can see from the easy properties that you have in the portfolio. And then you look at the difficult properties you have in the portfolio, and you see how much time they take to go through those sites. And that's how you benchmark it. You start with the medium as an average, and then you go to the difficult properties, you go to the easy properties. All right. So the idea is, the easy and the difficult pieces give you like guardrails on, like, the ceiling and the floor for these rates. Now, this has to be company wide. Everyone has to agree to it, and having a range makes it safe. That's the first point. And you want to do it for every item in the list. Okay. Once you do have that, it's like, now you have dials. You have dials For every little service that you go out there and perform, you have a dial for different types of mowers, you have a dial for different types of string trimming activities. Hell, you have a dial for pulling weeds by hand, spot spraying, um, and that gives you control. That gives you fine-grained control on all the activities that you're doing on that property. What you do with that control? You go through it from top to down. Every time you bid on a job, you would have access to these dials and you would turn them. You would look at the property and you would look at all the service items one by one, and you would evaluate, is it easy? Is it difficult? Is it medium? And you would do that for all the items in there, right? So if a client is like, I don't want you to give me like, lollipop shrubs. Don't do that for me. Great. So you're gonna make the pruning numbers easy. If a client is like, no, I want lollipop shrubs. Okay, cool. I'm gonna make the pruning difficulty rate hard because now I gotta shape the shrubs. I can't just like get through it quickly. All right. So depending on what the client says, or even horticultural requirements, right? Like you look at a property and oh, this thing is not gonna grow that frequently. Or every time I hit that, it's not like I'll have to take a ton of plant material off. Still talking about pruning. So make it easy, right? Move it from medium to easy. So you got all these dials. If you see a client in front of you and the client is like trying to beat you down on price, or he doesn't have the budget, or you're trying to get a competition out of the relationship, then you got this control. You got the dials to play, and you got to make sure that they reflect true cost. Okay. Now, once you win the job, now all the service items that you had set the estimated hours for, these service items will then flow into the crew tickets. You will get the budgeted hours. You need to have a clear logic for the budgeted hours. All right. Clear hours, clear logic for the budgeted hours, and then the crews go out, perform the job, come back to record that data across the year for 30-35 visits that you do on that site. And then you're going to compare, where did the actual hours land, what were the budgeted hours, and what were the estimated hours. And you're going to look at this data every year, and you're going to find out what the delta is. All right. And then once a year, preferably during the winters when work slows down, you're going to put a week out and just work on it. Recalibrate the production rates. All right. So that's the way to do it. Sounds like a lot of work. Let's make it easy. So the idea is we want to do proper resource planning by measuring everything that it takes to service that job, every little item that's required. So we start with a base maintenance contract service kit. You will get access to a link of this kit at the end of the video, right? So you start with that list for that base maintenance contract. When we work with our clients, we set that service item and takeoff list for them. That's the first step we do. The second step is we work with them to set production rates. Now, this is how we look at production rates. They should reflect a true average, an average of true costs across all your crews, right? We already talked about that. And then you want to take that average and then you want to adjust upwards and downwards to discover difficulty, hard to service properties, easy to service properties, two ranges, right? And do the same for quality, like we discussed. Now, when you do that across hundreds and hundreds of jobs, when you're actually estimating, not when you're setting it up, but when actually estimating, that makes a huge difference to the hours that you come up with, right? So huge difference to the cost, huge difference to the margins you make, and the clients you acquire. So that's why we are doing all this. Back to our discussion. So according to difficulty and quality demands, you set some rate ranges, right? Now, if you don't have those numbers, all of them, let's say you have some of them, but you don't have all of them, then the ones that you don't have, we supply them to you. We supply them to you and we help you figure it out. Now, for example, if you look at this property, all right, on this property, you've got 30-inch easy, 30-inch medium, you've got all sorts of difficulties here. And production rates are different, okay? If I zoom into it, let's just look at 52-inch easy. Now, when you zoom down, you will see there are a lot of areas where the mowers just can run free, pick up speed, eat up a lot of grass. But then close to the buildings and under the canopies, you can see very clearly here that the mowers will not be able to get to high speed. Okay, so all of these areas that I'm turning off and turning on, all of these areas, they have been placed in 52-inch medium. Okay. And then this is 52-inch hard. When you don't have free access, open access where you can't pick up speed, then you need to adjust your production rates for those areas. Not all turf is the same, man. Like some turf is just hard, some turf is easy, and the production rate has to reflect that because mowing is going to be one of your biggest cost items. Now, when we look at the production rates for all of these items, you can clearly see that the 30-inch medium is 12,000, 30-inch easy is 16,000. The difference is stark, 30% different. When you look at 52-inch medium, that's 50,000. When you look at 52-inch hard, that's 40,000. So the difference is 20%. Significant differences, 20%, 30%. When you take those differences and you spread that across, hundreds of properties in your portfolio, hundreds of bids that you're putting out every year, they add up. And that's why we want to tighten down. We don't want to miss on these calculations, on these numbers. So that's the point. That's the point of doing this. So when we set production rates, we start with your rates. Wherever there are blanks, we fill in the blanks, or we can start with our rates and you can put in the rates that you bring in. Okay. Now you have some production rate benchmarks. You were just looking at those benchmarks on that estimate. Here's another view of that. You can start with this, get you off the races quickly, and use these numbers to arrive at difficult and easy. These are all medium rates. So you can use that to go 20-30% up and down to arrive at easy and medium for your company. All right, cool. Now, once you've got your production rates down, right? You got your service items down, you got your production rates down, you got all these dials that you can start playing with. Now you plug in measurements. You want to work with a system that counts everything, no matter how big or how small it is. And SiteRecon is that tool. We inventory all of these assets for you and we get into the detail. Like we love getting into the detail. Right. So I love to show everyone this. When we look at the measurements done on this property, you will find us looking at small shrubs, medium shrubs, large shrubs. I think that, yeah, it's already open here. Turn this off. Turn off palm trees. And then look at this. Shrub count large. All shrub cover. It's not much. Then all your ornamental trees. Shrub count large, shrub count medium, shrub count small. You can see all these different pieces here. They're right next to each other, but when you go and prune them, you're going to spend different time on each one. And that's why you want to break that down, because the production rates look very different. If I scroll down and we start looking at pruning. So for pruning, you can see you can do 20 small shrubs in an hour, but only 10 large shrubs in an hour. So that's the difference. So you want to get the inventory right. When you get the production rates right, service items right, get the inventory right, you've got the cost right. we know exactly where we land. Now, once we know the cost, we got to know the customer. We got to figure out how they want to handle. They want us to handle seasonality, whether it's colors or it's mulch, cleanup, all these different activities. How do they want us to handle that? We want to know where our market is pricing at. One way to do that is use the production rate benchmarks that come with SiteRecon. So you can just look at the averages out there and you can get an estimation of, okay, this is where the market could be at. Now, these benchmarks, we serve our clients as part of their subscription. And these benchmarks have been created by leveraging existing data across the country, anonymized. And to give you a peek into it, let's look at this sheet that's got cost per acre. All right. So for HOA versus commercial, you can clearly see the difference is huge. Every number that you see on this sheet, by the way, is dollars per acre. So the cost of operating on an HOA per acre for the whole year, the cost is $2,000. On commercial lots, it's $1,400. Commercial would include everything from offices to schools, industrial. So you can see the big difference between those two numbers. If we break that down into weekly services and detailed services, you can see for HOAs, the weekly services and the detailed services, the numbers are actually pretty comparable. But for commercial, the numbers are different. And the difference is significant. It's like almost 40% lower for commercial properties. Now, what does that mean? Well, first, it gives you an idea about where people are pricing their services. Is this where you are? Are you underpricing? Are you overpricing? Where's your cost at? Are you being inefficient in the way you are thinking about how long it's going to take you to do that property? So that's one use case here. Something else that you can just see right here is if the cost of weekly and detailed services are so similar for HOAs, if your company just does HOAs, you're going to have a serious problem during seasonal work. Detailed work is seasonal. If you spend similar number of hours in your weekly work and detail work, that means when it's detailed, there's going to be a spike in labor demand, huge spike for you guys if you just do HOAs. So it's a good idea to have a mix of properties. But also, if you just do HOAs, it makes sense to offload the mulching piece over to your subcontractor. So if you zoom down into the breakout of these numbers, service-wise, you can see mulching actually is the biggest contributor by far to the detailed services. It's like 2/3 of it. So if you outsource mulching, then you don't have that spike. Then you can take your detail crew and have them just run pruning jobs, and you should be okay. You should be okay. But it's still going to be a lot of rush, and you're going to need a detail crew focused on that. So yeah, these insights come from these numbers that we're seeing here and how contractors deal with service challenges during different seasons. Back to our discussion. So that's the value of knowing the market, and this is data that we offer our clients as part of their subscription. Now, why does this matter? This matters. All of that we have been discussing so far. Industry averages will not apply to you. Okay, even if you get a consultant on board, you get them to set your estimating system in place, you will still have to continuously work on your production rates. You will have to work on getting your margins right. It's going to be a system that you operate forever. However, that system has to be set up, because once you set up, then a lot of interesting possibilities open up. So imagine you have a portfolio of 100 properties, and in that, all the mowing, half of that is done by the 48-inch mower. Okay, half of all mowing is done by the 48-inch mower. Now, tomorrow you run across a robotics company and they say, we're going to take care of all your 48-inch mowing, and the production rate is going to be saving you 10% on total hours. And you're going to think like, well, that's cool. Where do I put these machines? So you pull out the maps, you pull out the data, and you know exactly where those machines will go. Great. How much do these machines cost? Oh, it's going to cost something that you can recover over like 3 years. All right. The recovery is over 3 years. Cool. Now I'm going to get my team together and I'm going to ask them if they can drive that efficiency, if they can drive that 10% and shave that off the mowing numbers. If they can't shave that off the mowing numbers, then there's no point in investing. Let's say they can shave that off. Great. I make the investment and then the team gets to training and targeting that metric, the metric that we decided that we're going to pursue. And all of that is just an example for mowing. Even if it's not a robot, you're just moving from a slower mower to a faster mower. Now you know exactly where to train your team on, how much you can expect from them, and which routes will need that machine. So you get that clarity, you get that insight. And you go doing that from service to service, from machine to machine. And over time, you convert your business into this profit-making machine. Right? And that's where your true competitive advantage comes from, when you do that continuously over time. This system also gives you an ability to take care of clients across the spectrum of market out there. You go from a municipal property to a property being managed by a commercial, like a professional property manager. Let's say a Class A office complex, and you've got an HOA board. Across these types of clients, the requirement is going to be dramatically different, very different requirements. And so a system that helps you go from a municipal client to an HOA board with ease will help you win a lot more of the market as you go from year to year to year. Why? Because it helps you customize. It helps you customize without losing out on cost. It helps you customize the cost and then help you place margin on top. That's the system, right? And if you keep the clients happy, then you get referrals. And you can only keep the clients happy when you are making money. You're giving them enough service. You're giving them a high quality of job. That's how you get retention. That's how you get referrals. So the promise is a system that evolves continuously and grows with your business. How'd you get there? 5-step personalized production rate plan. Step 1, set up service items and production rates like we talked about. Step 2, commit to a proven takeoff system and process. It's got to be detailed, it's got to be consistent, it's got to be accurate. Third, you want to set expectations with prospects. You want to test your estimate in the field. You want to make sure the client requirements are accounted for. It's fundamental to winning the job and winning it at a margin you want. Finally, you want to make sure once you win the job, you look at your job costing data as your guide and you calibrate your production rates every year. And do not forget to stay current. Make sure labor rates are updated, material rates are updated, and equipment purchases are updated in your production rate plan. So what's next? Start right now. There's a service item kit on the page. You'll find the link below. Download it, open it, start using it as a worksheet, start filling in your numbers. Book a call with us. Meet with me, meet with my team. We're going to look at that sheet. We're going to look at the numbers you have filled in, the numbers that you do not have. We're going to fill them in for you. Order an estimate with us. Use it for a property that you're already operating on so that you can compare it with actual costs. That's huge. Or use it for a property that you're bidding on and resolve a dispute that's ongoing in your team so that you can develop consensus around what your price needs to be. Your choice. Once you get that estimate, verify that on the property. Talk to the client. Make sure it matches what he wants done. Finally, Build your company's production rate repository. Use your job costing data to update your service-specific production rates and keep working on it. This is a system that continuously evolves. Never let go of it. Thank you so much for listening in, guys. It was awesome talking to you. This is Utkarsh Sharma from SiteRecon signing off. And good luck to you all. Hope you get your production rate system set up in place ASAP. Bye, guys.